Hey, welcome back to CES 2020. I'm Jeff Bakalar, and today we're here to talk about the future of sports betting. So while sports gambling has been legal here in Vegas since 1949, it's been illegal everywhere else in the U.S. But in 2018, the Supreme Court struck down a federal ban that prohibited sports gambling. Now it's up to the states, and today a handful of states have already legalized it, while the others sort of figuring it all out, which makes it perfectly ripe for discussion here to talk about the current state of sports gambling and where it's going. Joining me in the panel right here, Jason Robbins, CEO of DraftKings. Scott Butera is the president of interactive gaming at MGM. And Scott Kaufman-Ross, senior vice president and head of fantasy and gaming at the NBA. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me here today. If we could just first kind of go around the table and sort of understand what the current landscape is of the intersection between technology and sports gambling and what that kind of looks like in the way it currently exists. So if you want to start off.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that's changed in the world of sports gambling over the last 10, 20 years has been mobile and generally digital becoming such a dominant way that people place wagers. Even in the illegal market now, it's no longer really the majority of people calling up their local bookie.
Right.
Most people in the illegal market are using websites and other sorts of digital means of placing wagers. So that's changed everything, and what that means is everything is more trackable now. So things like game integrity issues, responsible gaming, all those sorts of things are much, much more easily tracked and addressed.
Okay. Scott,
Yeah.
how do you feel about it right now?
I think this conference is a great example of how technology and sports is coming together. I mean, we're seeing, a lot of new applications for sports betting. A lot of it's going to be mobile. A lot of it's going to be driven in the future by in-game betting, which is when you're actually watching a contest and betting on a contest as it's taking place. And that's all driven by technology, the ability to make betting lines, set prop bets in real time as a contest is taking place is a big element of that. Also, all of the technology related to sports itself, performance related, measuring data, how athletes are physically performing during a contest. Some of the specialty data that leagues like the NBA and my partner Scott are doing with shot trackers so that you can see sort of like launch angles and the depth and speed of how players are performing are all things that will enhance sports betting and ultimately be used for sports bets themselves. So to me, that's really where it's coming together. And I think we're going to get to a point where sports betting will be a really great customer experience from an entertainment standpoint, where you can actually watch something. You use sort of a touchscreen pad to bet on it as it's taking place and then get results immediately. So
Right.
I think that's pretty exciting.
And Scott, I know in terms of how gambling has affected the NBA directly, what can you say about that?
Sure. Well, for us, we know that a lot of our fans are using sports betting as a mechanism to engage with the NBA. And we also know that those who do bet on sports or play fantasy sports consume more content than other fans. And they're some of our most engaged fans. So we want to make sure that when they're having this experience, that it's a positive experience and that they're coming back to engage with us more.
Right.
And so our strategy has been to work with all the operators directly and to partner with everyone to give them the assets that they need to create a best-in-class product. So we have 9 partnerships to date, and thankfully both Jason and Scott are our NBA partners, and we license them the right to use NBA marks and logos to create a much more authentic-looking product, to use our real-time data feed so that in-play betting can be done in real time. And that point there is what we think is extremely important, which is, as Jason said and Scott said, people are no longer just betting on the final score before the game starts. They're betting during live gameplay. They're betting on prop bets. And so having sub 1 second latency data so that you can have that live, interactive, real-time experience, that's the gaming experience that our fans demand. And we want to make sure all the big operators have the access to that.
Jason, you briefly talked about responsibility. Now, thanks to technology, betting is that much more pervasive and accessible. I live in New Jersey, so I can gamble wherever I am on my phone in New Jersey. But when you talk about responsibility, like I took the responsibility of uninstalling an app because maybe I was getting a little too excited about gambling on hockey. What can you talk about in terms of responsibility and that being put in the operator's hands and how you're dealing with that?
Well, first of all, I think a big step is getting it into a legal regulated environment, because then there is real accountability around protecting consumers and also around policing and reporting suspicious issues that may affect the integrity of the sports contests themselves. As far as the operators go, I think the operators play an essential role in this, and there's really kind of two forms that takes. One is providing tools and resources to players, so we, along with Scott's company and most other operators, provide players with the opportunity to place limits on themselves, to lock their account for a specified period of time if they want to take a breather, and all kinds of variety of ways of essentially making sure that they're playing within a level that they're comfortable with. We also regularly review account info, particularly amongst accounts that are playing for significant dollars, to make sure that we don't see any patterns of behavior that we find troubling, and if we do, we take steps to hopefully mitigate the situation. So it is really an evolving thing, but it's something that we take really seriously. As I think about what can make this industry succeed or not succeed, not doing it the right way around issues of responsible gaming, a lot of which ultimately will come back to hurt not just the customer but the operator. We all have to think long term, and we all have to treat that very seriously.
Sure.
And I think it's such an exciting time for the industry right now that it's really fun and great time, but it's also really important that the operators think through what are the ways this can go wrong and make sure that we're all working together to prevent those things from happening.
Right. There's definitely a lot of responsibility there. Scott, we had talked earlier, and I think MGM had recently taken an eSports bet. Can you speak a little bit to that? I know that's a thing a lot of people who are interested in the world of eSports are considering.
Well, we're incredibly impressed by the growth of eSports, and we see that as a real opportunity as we go forward in sports betting. We did take our first bet in New Jersey on League of Legends finals, which was exciting in the fact that we got it done. It wasn't necessarily a large revenue opportunity, but it did set the tone for doing that. One of the challenges that you have in esports that you don't have in regular way sports is, for example, having an established league with established rules and having sort of a consistent product that you can regulate. In esports, you have publishers that have games. The games change often, so that adds a layer of complexity that we're working our way through. But we're comfortable that if we work with certain publishers, we'll be able to get there in the near term. Also, you mentioned responsibility with esports. You have to be particularly careful because a lot of the esport participants are under gaming ages, so we have to be very careful about that. And as a large global gaming operation, we take responsible gaming, as Jason mentioned, very seriously. Actually have established programs like GameSense where people can go in and learn about gaming and how to do it correctly, and it should always be entertainment. But I think with technology, it does allow us to monitor participants in ways that we never have before, both in terms of who they are and how they behave. So we're comfortable that with technology and with the ability to work with publishers on getting established rules and regulations, esports will be a big part of future sports betting.
Is there a challenge that you're working with maybe developers to sort of iron out in terms of, before esports became a big thing, these leagues had to work with developers to basically convince developers to program that into the way they create games. Is that a thing that's being talked about?
I think there's part of that, and just sort of, again, creating consistency and, a product that people can, you go through a regulatory process, it takes time, so you don't want it to constantly be in flux.
Right.
So you want to have a regulatory body like the existing, major leagues all have, and know that everything's being monitored. And again, just having this sort of consistency that somebody can regulate, opine on, and then execute on.
Cool. Scott, when you talk about how the NBA has implemented gaming and gambling into real-time, sort of that fan experience in the arena, I've heard people sort of criticize that as to, is that going to change kind of the feeling of being at an arena where, you're rooting for a team to win, but maybe you're also rooting for the over at the same time. So have you noticed a change in the way that affects the dynamic of like that fan experience?
Well, to your point, while we do know that there's a lot of fans that want to engage with sports betting as a mechanism to engage with our sport, there's also a lot that don't, and we want to keep a family-friendly atmosphere as well. So there's certainly a balance to strike there. Right. And the way that we think about sports betting and integrating into our telecast and integrating into our digital products is to try to make it a little bit more of a pull versus a push. If you want to engage with sports betting, we want to make that available to you. We want you to have that great experience. But if you're not as interested in sports betting, we don't necessarily want it to be thrust upon you. So we're trying to find those mechanisms for fans to opt in to say, this is something I'm interested in. We have a free-to-play game ecosystem called NBA Pick'em. It's all free-to-play, and you can win prizes. MGM is a sponsor of a number of these games, and that's one mechanism where fans are sort of opting in to predictive gaming. They're saying this is one of the ways that they like to engage with the NBA, right. And then we have a database of fans that we know that's interested in that. We've also seen some of our teams experiment with alternate broadcasts. So the Wizards and the Sixers, along with their partner NBC Sports, they've been doing alternate gaming telecasts, where if you're interested in the gaming broadcast, you go to the secondary channel and you can watch that, but the primary feed still has the traditional broadcast feed for those who don't want that. So we continue to look for those opportunities where fans can opt in to engage with sports betting, but not sort of throw it in the face of everyone who may not be interested.
Gotcha. Earlier, we mentioned how this sort of, technology is affording people the ability to have that accessibility in terms of, gambling from their phone. What's that next step, though? What's the next sort of jump that will really move the needle and create an experience that is kind of just not out there anymore? I'll leave this open to anyone who would want to take that. Is there one certain thing? I know 5G is on the horizon, and that, introduces a whole, new kind of latency and speed improvement. Is there one piece of tech that's really going to take it to the next step?
I certainly think that you touched on an important one. 5G and solving for latency is going to be huge. Yeah. Because I think one of the future opportunities for sports betting, and Scott touched on this a bit, is the integration of content and sports betting. And if you're going to do that in a digital interface, you can't have streaming delays of 30, 60, 90 seconds and have a real-time betting experience. So, solving, and whether it's 5G or faster streams, finding a way to solve for that latency will create that more interactive, integrated experience, and I think that's a huge opportunity moving forward.
I agree. I think what 5G allows you to do is to do things that you have to do sort of in various pieces right now all at once. So if I'm watching a game, I want the ability to watch something, bet on it, maybe get data that supports my bet, and do that sort of real time and almost impulsively. So I'm watching, I think so-and-so is going to make this field goal, boom, 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 I do my touchscreen, I make my bet, and then I have maybe a results page, alongside it. So I think that's really the next stage, is that sort of, ease of application, almost that you see with other, apps that are out there now, that don't have to go through these massive regulatory processes or have latency issues. Sure. Once that's solved, you'll be able to consume sports and then bet on sports, real time with data to support it.
Right. Jason, do you think we'll ever see a day where DraftKings is on some sort of consumer electronic device, or how do you see that future shaking out?
In what sense do you mean on a consumer?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I could talk to a voice assistant and gamble, or I don't know, do something on my smart fridge.
I mean, 5G is I think part of what that will enable is IoT and device connectivity, and I think most people, right now are at the early stages of experiencing that. But in 5 years, I don't want to predict how long, in some period of time, I think it'll be common where you walk into your house and you say, Alexa, put $50 on the game tonight. And I think then what will also happen is your smartphone, your TV, everything else will know you bet on that game and will recommend, hey, you want to watch it now when it's on. And that kind of connectivity will make things easier. It's sort of what Scott was saying, right, where the easier you make the experience for people, the more seamless, the more that they know your preferences, their devices know your preferences, and the more connectivity that exists there, the better the consumer experience. And people will come to expect that in everything the same way. If they can use their voice-activated speaker to make any sort of purchase or anything else, why would they not expect to be able to do this in the same fashion? And then ultimately, I think if you can make it so that those types of things are then linked to the actual content that Scott Kaufman-Ross's league produces, so that we know what types of games, plays, interesting, things in terms of content that supplement the game are going to be of interest to people. That will ultimately make their viewing experience better and will increase consumption of that content by exposing them to it more.
Okay. All right. Well, Jason, Scott, thank you so very much. That's going to do it for now.